Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, man, I'm really enjoying these two Marvel Publishing magazines, Alter Ego and Back Issue and Comic Trader. This one in particular, obviously, this came out in the year that changed it all, 2016. Uh, Obviously, pick and choose what stuff is interesting to me, but I'm finding out a lot of fascinating information, and I'm Mr. Autistic Memory Guy, and this is stuff I've never heard. So, Don Glut, I'm familiar with him. Okay, the guy has been a comic writer, a musician, filmmaker. He actually made films back in the 50s and the 60s as a kid, and he's made films again. Multi-talented guy, wrote for every publisher back when you had lots of different comic publishers, not just Marvel and DC or Charlton and Archie. There was like Gold Key, Dell, obviously Warren, right, all the horror stuff that had come back in the 70s. But I had never seen, like, I always thought Gold Key was known for, yeah, they had, was it Magnus, the robot fighter, and Dr. Solar, who were later acquired by Valiant Comics in the 90s. But I never knew there was all these other original ones here that this guy did. And look at the covers, man. Painted covers. They look like the covers of like a novel rather than a comic. I thought that was really interesting. Anyway, let me just jump in here. Okay, Roy Thomas, of course, is the editor of this, the great Roy Thomas. And this is a compatriot of his. So it's very interesting looking at Mr. Glut. I always thought his name was Glut, but it's pronounced Glut. Okay? You want to hear his parents, right? He's the boomer personified, right? But what's interesting is as someone who's a fan of working in different mediums, it's actually, I think, a good thing to do. He started out making films, not 8mm films, 16mm, which is interesting because his father had one that someone gave him because he owed him money. So he used 16mm film. Okay, that's like a step up from 8mm, making homages to classic horror, of course, right? Monster Kid, but also comic books, superheroes, making arguably superhero costumes that were more accurate than the 70s adaptations. If you remember that horrible Spider-Man TV show or the Captain America movie from the 70s, where even I was a kid and I'm like, yo, I don't like this. And look, he sculpted these Harryhausen creatures. Really, amazing. I didn't realize he had done all this, but it's interesting as how he got the attention, of course, of Forey Ackerman, right? Whenever you think of him and Famous Monsters, you can't. I mean, the Monster Kid thing is encapsulated there, okay? And this led to him becoming his agent and him getting work, right? Comic work here for Charlton, right? And then Warren was the Warren Publishing was starting the new horror comics, magazine type, comics here. And that's how he got work there. I thought that was interesting. He wrote for Vampirella #1. So this guy covers a lot of bases. This is when comics, it's not just damn superheroes. You have horror. You have fantasy, barbarian, science fiction. What's interesting here is how he also, and I remember this, a lot of these, when you think of European comics and European artists, right? The Italians, the Spanish, the French, you forget that there was Spanish artists who did work for American publishers as well. I remember seeing Esteban Morodo and some other guys, Ernie Colon, but also other Spanish artists, particularly in the Western stories that DC had, the horror stories, the war stories. I remember a lot in like GI Combat, and you could tell that kind of Spanish style, European style of art here. Even though it was made for American publishing. So it was interesting. Look at all these guys, right? Neil Adams, a lot of these guys are gone now. Yeah, Ernie Colon, right? Jose, Bay, yeah, a lot of Spanish artists working for Americans. Right? So now, I thought this was interesting here when he talked about working at Gold Key. Right? Gold Key had a policy back then, an unwritten policy. They treated contributors like a family. They wanted to make sure every writer and artist they hired could make a living and support their wives and kids. Right? And they were publishing a horror anthology at the time, Boris Karloff Tales of Mystery. That was interesting. It's just the insights into this. Okay, we're talking about the 1960s. We're talking about when a comic artist is a guy, trying to pay the bills. And it was interesting him describing Gold Key Warren, all these other publishers here, and how he gives credit to Gold Key for trying to have their contributors, their artists and their writers make a living. Right? Isn't that crazy idea? And this guy here, Jesse Santos, this guy, Filipino artist. Look at that art. There's that style, that kind of Spanish style, I guess you'd say. And then these are the Gold Key editors. Like I said, Gold Key Comics weren't common where I was. And the guy makes a good point about how Gold Key was not distributed. It was a West Coast company. It wasn't distributed as heavily in the East. I could imagine Marvel and DC being based in New York City. Like if they didn't have a hand in that. And I think Chart was based in Connecticut. So you think these Northeast publishers would try to keep out these West Coast publishers, like wrestling territories or something, right? This is interesting here too. He created Dagger, the Invincible. This is cool. Look at that cover, man. Painted cover, right? And once again, this has Jesse Santos doing the art. There you go. So this is interesting. I had never heard of these comics. I have heard of Dr. Spectre though, and apparently this was like a recurring horror adventure story with this character. So very interesting. In the comic store they actually have the collected Dr. Spectre stories. So, but you know how it is. Money's tight. It's only so much you can read. But of course, here you go, Gold Key. There's Dr. Solar, right? Yeah. That was interesting hearing it too. This character, Trag. What is this? Trag and the Sky Cards. Dude, this is awesome. Aliens versus cavemen. Dude, with dinosaurs. I mean, come on, man. Look at this. By the same artist, right? And apparently he also he worked for Archie Comics. Now everyone forgets. You think of Archie Comics, you think of Archie, but you forget they had a superhero line. Okay, I barely remember them, but I know they had superhero comics. And Gray Morrow, he got him a job here doing work also. All right, Tarzan, look at that. Man, he wrote the novelization of the best Star Wars film ever. The best film ever, right? Empire Strikes Back. So, don't you say Chapter 8 or none of that New Hope nonsense. Don't even start it. All right. So, that was cool. And eventually he worked for Marvel, right? Doing the Cull. Like, Cull the Destroyer. I thought it was Cull the Conqueror, but I guess they were trying to make the Destroyer like the second Conan film. And there's Ernie Chan, right? Another Filipino guy. Great underrated artist, inked John Buscema, but also was a good artist in his own right, penciler and everything. And just some of the Invaders. Okay, I remember the Invaders. Okay, obviously I look at all this stuff differently, but it was fun. And I thought it was interesting. I don't know why the interviewer gets in here. Think about Cain, okay? Solomon Cain, not comfortable. Cain was a puritanical guy, a religious fanatic. I worked to make him believable. I didn't enjoy those stories. He did the second story, where Cain fights Dracula the second time. Right. You're not the first person who's worked on Solomon Cain. Who's remarked to me on the unpleasant personality of that character. But regardless of that, and he had a lesbian character here. What is this? Anyway, just looking at the Invaders again, the original Android Human Torch. I thought it was cool. So anyway, but let me get to this real quick. I gotta give this. I know you're like, who cares about your personal reminiscences? Hey man, this is a history. Look at this, dude. Yeah. Oh, that's when. Oh, look, there already was a female Thor. Huh? Right. The What If was great. He also did the What If. Now this is okay. I remember this story. My first stepdad, right? Yeah, I'm well adjusted, can't you tell? Had bought this comic for me. What if the Avengers had formed in the 50s? And I always remember this. You had the gorilla, right? The intelligent gorilla, the robot. You had Aphrodite, okay, the actual goddess, being formed by this Asian American Fed. Now, apparently, they were mixing some old comic stuff in here. The Yellow Claw was actually a character from a defunct company, as was this Asian American Fed. But you had these characters here. The 3D man, He was three men that became one. So he has 3 times the strength, the speed, the robot, of course, the living robot, and Marvel Boy. And I'm trying. Was that? Yeah. Marvel Boy. Who the hell was Marvel? I'm trying to still remember who the hell Marvel Boy was. I gotta look it up again. Yeah, Marvel. I'm like, what? I remember looking at them and okay, what is this dude? I never like, what the hell is his power? Okay. Yeah, Sal Buscema, man. This dude. Alright. Alright, so let me, with my nerdy ass. Alright. And this was great here. Right? There he is, right? I didn't realize. Did you know, and it makes sense, in the 70s, did you know that Marvel had made a monster movie magazine of their own? Okay, just like Famous Monsters or any of the other ones. Did you know that? I didn't know that. I had no idea. I had no idea they had done that. Interesting. Anyhow, a lot of time on that. I don't make these too long, but I had no idea that DC had the John Carter property in the 70s. I know Marvel did. So it's a story about this artist here, man. Talking about an association formed by, look at it, Stan Lee. It was kind of like, I guess, I don't know, a union. What is there? The Academy of Comic Book Arts, okay, which was sort of like equivalent of the National Cartoonist Society. Of course, they were comic strip artists for newspapers and not comic books. And there's an interesting story here about the politics, the internal things going on. Joe Kubert had an issue with someone in management being be a member of it. I thought that was interesting when, of course, Stan Lee, and at the time, Carmen Infantino, if you remember him, the artist, was part of that. So interesting. I don't know. You know, and apparently Archie Comics, John Goldwater, right? Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. Okay, obviously that's not him, but it's like that. But yeah, they were working as the comics code here. Of course, the infamous Denny O'Neil Green Lantern, Green Arrow stories with that asshole, hipster, rich, bourgeois leftist Green Arrow. And the infamous issue where Speedy, my ward is a junkie. And I love this too. Green Arrow was like, you always have all the answers, Green Arrow, you fucking bleeding heart. Anyway, well, what's your answer to that? Yeah, look at you. Oh my God. Speedy was a junkie. Now remember, let's see if anyone remembers. Probably not. You're probably too young. There was a free comic book given out in my elementary school. I remember it was about it was the Teen Titans, and it was about drugs. And Nancy Reagan was in the comic talking about, you know, just say no, right? The thing that nobody listened to all these decades later, as you can see. But I remember that. I remember Speedy was recovered in that. He was saying I was a junkie. I did speed. He mentioned all these things I had never heard of because, you know, I mean, my parents were doing drugs all the time, but I stayed away from that. You know, I actually credit that. Sometimes your role models, or sometimes when your parents do things they shouldn't, sometimes that makes you do the opposite. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. And the last thing they did was to get in the movie, the '78 film of Superman. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster's name put on there. Oh, yeah, that was fair. And just seeing what else is here. So they just rounded out a lot of stuff here. You see early comic conventions, like in the late 60s, where people were dressing up as the characters. Cosplaying is new. So, anyway. And once again, a great issue of Alter Ego, man. Keep it coming. Look how cool these comics are from Gold Key. Had no idea. Later.